Best 5 marches on the first quarter of 2021. They will give you a lot of value and utilities on the field battle in Rise of Kingdoms. Hello everyone and welcome back to another Rise of Kingdom video. My name is Legend Ronnie and today I'm going to talk about the best 5 marches that will give you a lot of value, utilities, damage, and give you a lot of kills on the field battles in the same time. If you all didn't know, I've done videos about big and small murder balls, like which are the 5 marches that I use when I go in a big murder ball, which are the 5 marches that I use when I go in a smaller murder ball, because in a smaller murder ball people can target your marches. Now I want to give you 5 marches that are best of both worlds. So the 5 marches that you can use either in a big or in a small murder ball, because you want to have an ease of mind. You don't have so many pre-setups, you probably don't have so many sculptures, you can't invest in so many commanders, or various other reasons. You might just want to have 5 marches that will be useful pretty much everywhere, including Sunset Canyon in very situation, or can be also useful in Ark of Osiris. But the main focus and the main purpose of these 5 marches will be for field battles, to give you utility, to give you tankiness, to give you damage, so you can get some kills and get the best value out of it. The first march that I'm gonna go is going to be Guan Yu and Leonidas, and you're probably wondering why I'm not choosing Guan Yu and Alexander. Like I was mentioning, you want to have the best of both worlds. Alexander will be included in one of the marches, but not in this one. Guan Yu and Leonidas, they have a very, very good and nice synergy in Rise of Kingdoms. They both came together at the same time. They are tier 3 type of legendaries. And how do I classify the tiers is how they were introduced into the games. Not necessarily that being a tier 3 is a lower tier or a higher tier or something like that. When you put Leonidas as a second to Guan Yu, you get a lot of benefits. First thing, you empower Leonidas' primary skill, which also hits only 3 targets, same as Guan Yu. And that means that they already have a very good synergy. It says over here, if the current target is affected by silence or attack reduction effects, it takes an extra 50% damage. But the thing is, and what Leonidas gives Guan Yu is exactly what he needs. It gives him the defense that he requires on the field battle. And on the second skill, you get 30% defense bonus and speed of rage gain. And it does make a difference. You do feel and you do see it, is even visually, Guan Yu generates rage faster and pops even more skills. Now if Guan Yu himself pops more skills, that also means more damage. So you have defensive, you have damage, and you have utility as well, and you have tankiness in the same time, because the more Guan Yu pops his primary skill, the more silence he does on top of the damage. After that, you can go on his third skill, and you're noticing that my Leonidas is 5511. I pretty much get a big value out of his third skill. I get a 600 shield out of 800 by just having the skill unlocked. Now, if the skill lock system is ever gonna be a thing, is ever gonna be introduced in Rise of Kingdoms, you can go a 5515 Leonidas. And honestly, I don't really think you need to unlock his expertise. But the fourth skill, I find it very good. It's kind of doubling the amount of damage on the stacks, because with just unlocking you get up to 20%, because you can keep 4 of these stacks, and that's 20% damage. Now if you have this max, it's going to be 40% damage. Now that's a whole lot of a difference from 20% to 40% damage. While the third skill is just a self shield, 600 to 800, I don't really see that being something super high or needed. If the skill lock system is not yet implemented, 5511 is good to go, or if you have the luxury for the sculptures, just max Leonidas. The second march that I want to mention is Artemisia leading with YSG as a second in command. So there you have it. YSG is also included. You cannot skip YSG, his value is too great. When I was playing with my alt in Heroic Anthem, I noticed that Artemisia with YSG, they are doing amazing, especially if they are being left alone, is pretty wild. The amount of skill damage and the amount of damage in general they can do in group fights, in group battles. You're probably wondering, why not Ramses? Well, I do have to say that if you have Ramses, you can also go Artemisia and Ramses. But my recommendation would be Artemisia and YSG, and just try to pay attention to them. Make sure you don't get too much into the murder ball, so you don't get swarmed in. That's what I was doing with my alt, and honestly, 8 out of 10 situation I was having really good trades, like really good trades. The only problem with Artemisia and YSG is that there is no minimum skill investment. Like, you could probably go a 5-5 Artemisia, but to be honest, you kind of want the 4 skill, and the expertise, 1200 damage factor over 3 seconds is pretty good. A lot of people say that, yeah, but the target gains extra 50% skill damage and so on. When you're really swarming a target, does it really matter that it gets 15% extra skill damage? I don't think so. I find this a little bit hurtful in a garrison situation where you're being rallied by skill damaging marchers. And another good thing about Artemisia, you can also use her in garrison, either in your Ark of Osiris or on your own city or in a flag situation against Attila or some kind of combinations. Probably not all of them, because like I was mentioning, her expertise increasing the skill damage of the target can be a little bit painful. She's also very useful in Ark of Osiris. She's also very useful in Sunset Canyon. And this is another thing what I want to mention about Guan Yu and Leonidas. They are also very useful in Sunset Canyon. They are very useful in Ark of Osiris. So there you have it. These are very universal marchers that can be used almost anywhere. For example, when you want to go for the Ark, for the middle fight, you want to bring as much AoE as possible. And you have Guan Yu and Leo, a very good rage engine. You have Artemisia and YSG, a very good AoE damage combination. So all the marches that I want to mention about it, they have multiple utilities in Rise of Kingdoms, not just for a single purpose. Going on to the third march, and this is where I'm going to include Alexander. You have Richard and Alexander. Richard being first and Alexander being as a second in command. Now you're probably wondering why. Why didn't I just do Guan and Alex? Because Alexander gives so much attack, right? It would make sense. And then just put Richard with Leonidas, because it also works. Richard and Leonidas is a very tanky pair. I don't think anyone would ever want to pick on your Richard and Leonidas, or even if they do, they'll probably just let it go and say, okay, just let this guy stay there. I just don't want to touch him again. Because Richard and Leonidas is a very tanky and bulky march, very hard to get down. But the reason I didn't put Guan Yu with Alex, because they are squishy. I mean, in Heroic Anthem, Guan and Alex, even though they are infantry, they don't have very much defense. You get to a point in Rise of Kingdoms where you need to make your marchers in such a way that they will also have defense. Like Genghis and Double C, going into Heroic Anthem, that's a no-go. Genghis and YSG, or those kind of glass cannon of marchers, they are starting to diminish. Like, trust me, they will not have very high results or very high utilities. Now, the reason of the third march using Richard and Alexander is because you want his debuff on the battlefield. The 30% damage reduction, even that it is for 2 seconds, but it's 5 targets. And because Richard has a fan shape area, and you want to make sure that you will bring as many Richards as possible on the battlefield, because the debuff that he does is really amazing. And because he has a fan shape area, you cannot know in which direction your Richard is positioned. So having multiple Richards, they can definitely be positioned in different directions, meaning that they will keep debuffing different targets. It's not like the AoE where it can be like hitting the same marchers, or you can buff the same marchers over and over. With the fan shape area type of commanders, is a total different story. So as many as possible, now that we know how commanders like that buff, like Constantine or Joan of Arc or Mulan or etc., whichever order they are, we know how they work. The buffing commanders has a higher role in field battles from my perspective, rather than having a lot of buffing commanders. That's just my point of view. I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna post a card on the top so you know what I'm talking about. It's pretty shocking. I didn't know that playing for 3 years, but hey, at least better I found out later than never. And the reason of putting Alexander as a second to Richard, because you also want to have some damage, you also want to have a little bit of protection for Richard, because Richard keeps healing and healing and healing, but you do get a little bit of protection from the shields, and you can shield other allies. And then is the expertise of Alexander. This is something that you want to bring, again, as many Alexanders as possible on the field, because they will debuff random targets. As far as I know, it's random targets, and meaning that if you have multiple Alexanders, there's chances that more and more targets can be debuffed. And that's pretty good, because you never know, maybe my march gets debuffed that I'm swarming with 5 marches, and you're just helping me taking down my target faster. And another reason why Richard and Alexander is because you get march speed, so Richard and Alexander will not be so slow, because if you put Richard and Leonidas, I can guarantee you that you can go make a coffee, smoke a pot, and you can come back and they're probably still barely halfway where you want to go and fight. And Guan Yu has a pretty decent mobility, so that's why Guan Yu and Leonidas, and this is another micromanagement thing that I always try to make when I combine my marches, to try to add a little bit of mobility as well in them. And if you're wondering if this march, Richard and Alexander, also works in Sunset Canyon, yes, it definitely does. It can also work in Ark of Osiris when you go into the middle fight for the Ark, or even when you're swarming a building, or whenever you have any kind of fighting. So multiple purpose and utilities for this march as well. My Richard is not max because I didn't found a good reason for me to invest in a tier 1 commander, because it comes at the beginning of the game. That's when you get Richard. I can get him from the daily chest. I'm still working on it, and at some point he will be max, and hopefully I will utilize him, but I just had various other commanders to invest on. At some point he will be max anyway. Regarding Richard and Alexander as a skill point, or how you should invest on them, you could go as a 5-5-1-1 Richard and just max Alexander, but my recommendation is in the end that you do max Richard. He is very, very useful. Once you obtain his expertise, is very powerful to decrease the march speed for 5 seconds and by 50% by just touching a target, and that's every 10 seconds. That's pretty huge. Not to mention that you get more stats for infantry, and then you get more healing enhancement with his primary skill. A lot of players go 5-5-1-1 or 5-5-5-1, but I do recommend Richard, if you really like him or you really want to get the most out of him, to go ahead and just max skill him. Alexander can be useful as a 5-5-1-1, but I really and highly recommend max him. YSG, Alexander, these are two commanders priority in Rise of Kingdoms that you want to get their expertise. Let's move to the 4th march. Now the 4th march is obviously Saladin. You cannot skip Saladin from the field battle marches. You have Saladin, and second in command to Saladin, you want to put William. Now, why is that? First of all, what does everyone do when they go in a motherboard with 5 marches? You just select a target, right? And you attack it with all your 5 marches. You don't select one target and you send Richard there. You don't select one target and you send Saladin there. You just swarm it. So the first thing that you want to care about, or at least personally what I care about, is I want to make sure that the target is not going to run away so fast. So Saladin is a very good option to go with, because it will just slow the target quite a lot. Now, if you want to go with a minimum investment on Saladin, like probably a lot of players do, 5-5-5-1 Saladin is the best way to go. To be honest, 300 damage factor is not really something that you want from Saladin, especially if you're hurting on sculptures or you're a low spender or free to play. You want to make sure that you have sculptures from some of the other commanders, and you want to invest in some of the other pairings that are really good and make the most out of your sculptures. But if you do have the luxury to max skill him, then definitely max skill him, because even the march speed reduction goes up to 50%, and that can be pretty devastating. But as a 5-5-5-1, you have like a 95% or 90% very useful Saladin, like my alt does. My alt has a 5-5-5-1 Saladin, and I don't think I'm gonna max him because I don't get sculptures as much as I get on my main. This is the kind of march that you can also use for the middle on the arc fight, because you will either slow the target or you can slow the arc carrier. So Saladins are very good to have. You have a lot of defensive options with his third skill, counterattack damage reduction, skill damage reduction, attack and defense. And with William, you'll have damage packed and attack, and exactly what this march needs. You have his primary skill, which hits up to 3 targets, so again AoE value, which is very important. And then you have his fourth skill, which you can buff or either your marchers or your allied troops as long as you hit 2 or 3 targets. They gain 20% increased defense for 3 seconds and 50 rage per second. That is if you max William. And another good thing about William is that you can go as a minimum investment with him as well. You can either do 5-5-1-1 William, but my recommendation is that you do a 5-5-5-1, because if you look at his expertise, if you max the third skill is 800 damage factor. Now unfortunately my third skill is max, so I cannot see if you just keep only at 1, but I'm pretty sure that you don't get a whole lot of value. That's why when I started I've done a 5-5-5-1. The third skill is really good, and if you want to expert him to get the extra juice in the defense bonus, another 10% and the extra damage factor, then you can. But as a 5-5-5-1 William, you kind of have about 85-90% of the commander being very good and very useful. And this is another march that can be used in Sunset Canyon, in Arc, or wherever else you want. Recently, I even heard that Saladin and William is very useful in rallies, but again, you want to have max skill Saladin and William for that purpose. The fifth march that I will recommend for field battles is unquestionable and having the best of both worlds: Attila, primary, and Takeda as a second in command. Now, you're probably wondering why. Well, I don't think there is a better march on the field that can give you more results. And what I'm referring by results, I'm referring by getting kills, because this is what the purpose of this video is, about field battles. And before I'm going to talk more about Attila and Takeda, you're probably wondering, so hey, you didn't mention none of the newer commanders that you probably don't have unlocked. You didn't mention about Harald, you didn't mention about Nebu, Cyrus, there is Trajan that is also released into the game. Well, I can tell you the reasons why I haven't went with none of these commanders. For example, if you want to go for Nebuchadnezzar, he definitely has a lot of utilities, but I can guarantee you that an Artemisia and YSG is more tankier than a Nebuchadnezzar and YSG, for example. And for that reason, I went with Artemisia. But Nebuchadnezzar can also be very useful. If you want to use him, I would recommend to put as a second, to put someone like Ramses, so you can offer him protection. But you definitely want the skill talent tree first, and that's why I put Nebu first. And you put Ramses as a second, and there you have it. Then that can work. Nebuchadnezzar and YSG, I think they will definitely have a lot of AoE value. I see people using them in Sunset Canyon, and they are doing crazy damage. It's just for field battle, things are slightly different. And this video is for having best of both worlds. And then going on to the Harald, which I also didn't mention in none of the pairings yet. And after that, I'm going to resume on Attila and Takeda. The reason I didn't talk about Harald is because of his self-defense decrease, right? And who can you put Harald with? I heard a lot of reports saying that if you put Leonidas and Harald to give him, let's say, defensive option, is not doing so much damage. Or if you go with Constantine, or if you put anything else that can give him, like a Richard or a Charles Martel or something that can give him defensive options, it doesn't do so much damage. He's not so efficient, and he's still decreasing his defense by up to 75%. And another true reason is that players who know about Harald, and those are the players that will probably demolish your Harald, whenever they see him, they see the axes on the field, they know he's reducing his self-defense, and they just go for him. I can 100% tell you, I mean, at least myself, that's what I'm doing when I see Haralds. I don't let them there, because they can do some crazy high amount of damage. And if I would really want to pair Harald with someone, it would be with Alexander. And let's face it, Harald and Alexander can be a very squishy march. Maybe I haven't tested him yet, or I'm just talking from what I've seen so far on the field battles and what I have seen Harald in action. So it's not a whole lot that I can talk about Harald. But as much as I have seen, he works in rallies, like Guan Yu and Harald, I've seen that demolished in rallies. But on the field, to having best of both worlds is pretty hard to include Harald, at least from my point of view. And I also didn't talk about Cyrus. The reason I didn't talk about Cyrus is because he doesn't have as much AoE as possible, and he doesn't have as much defensive capability as possible. Now maybe Cyrus and YSG is what I wanted. When they first introduced into Rise of Kingdoms, I said that I'm definitely gonna want Cyrus for the Rage Engine. Him and YSG, they'll also have mobility because you have a little bit of march speed over here. Attack bonus is exactly what you need. But as I was mentioning earlier into the video, as you keep going into the game and they keep introducing commanders, you want commanders that can also give you defensive capabilities. And if you go back on the 4 marches that I gave you so far, they all have defensive capabilities. You have Richard and Alex, you have Guan Yu and Leonidas, you have Artemisia and YSG, you have Attila and Takeda, you have Saladin and William. So all these marches, they have something defensive. At least one of the commanders gives protection to the other commander, whilst a Cyrus and YSG situation is kind of a glass cannon. So you cannot have the best of both worlds. Trajan, I really like him for utilities, and a lot of players might have said, okay, but if you would have go with Harald and Trajan, that might have give you also benefits on the field, on your marches, increasing their skill damage, and it will also give you enough defense and health to protect your Harald. That might be true, but needs to be tested. Trajan is very new in Rise of Kingdoms. I don't think anyone has it, or probably just unlocked him. I'm not sure how many people actually maxed him. His skills look really nice, and honestly, I was really into it the moment he was released, but the fact that it only buffs 5 marches, I'm still thinking about it, if I want to go for him or not. But definitely, Harald with Trajan can be a very viable option. But it would just be like the 3rd infantry march, and I want to give some more options, because Attila Takeda is one march that a lot of players worked on or have, while Harald and Trajan is some very new commanders, and still players are exploring or trying to understand or trying to acquire information about them. Now, as I was mentioning, resuming on Attila and Takeda, what I do with Attila and Takeda, this is a small trick that I'm gonna give it to you in this video. I usually select a soft target whenever I go on the field, and I just let only Attila sink on that target and try to do as much damage as possible. Attila and Takeda is the one march you should not be worried if you get swarmed. You usually have, and 80-90% of the times if you get swarmed, you have good trades. This is one reason why I always like them, and as much as I want to, they are the one march that I always bring on the field, because when you want to do field battles, they are just amazing. They are just doing so many severely wounded, and you're getting so many good trades with them. I also done a specific video about Attila and Takeda. I'm going to make sure to post a card on the top. Not sure if you're going to use them in rallies, but for field battles, I can 100% tell you that they will give me a lot of benefits. Since I was talking about selecting a soft target and just letting them sink in, you're probably wondering, alright, so how you can control 5 marches doing that? When you select your next target to attack that is not for Attila and Takeda, you just deselect Attila and Takeda, because you have on the right down corner, and you just uncheck Attila and Takeda, and you just make sure that only 4 marches hit the same target. Now, if you want to make things easier, you can always just go with 5 marches, but sometimes this is what I do, because what happens, a lot of people try to send double Cs to just try to get attack, and then they just try to drag as many marches in, or some other soft targets that might just look juicy, and people get tempted and they go for them. And what I do, I just put Attila and Takeda because they don't do so much skill damage, and people, if they don't see their health bar going down so low, they're not going to retreat the march. And by the time they retreated, you probably cause about 50,000 severely wounded. So that's a win scenario. Either you're going to pay attention and you can retreat your Attila and Takeda, or not, you still had the very good trades. And it doesn't matter, even if your Attila and Takeda gets demolished, you'll still have good trades. So there you have it. This is the 5 marches that I highly recommend of having best of the both worlds. The only problem with the 5th march is that is not very useful in Sunset Canyon. In Ark of Osiris, you could use them for rally. Like even now, we are still thinking, because anything else is so easily swarmed, we are thinking to kind of switch and rally with Attila Takeda in our Ark of Osiris, because they just, survive more and they cause more damage to our opponents. At least they reduce their marches. So our marches that are on the field trying to support the rally would at least take them down easier. And maybe we can, after that, swarm the building and have some benefits. Everything that we tried, Ramses YSG, Guan Leonidas, Guan Alex, Saladin William, it just goes down so fast by a swarm and it doesn't do enough damage to the swarm. So I just think that we're gonna go back to Attila and Takeda. But for field battles, that's Attila and Takeda is a beast march to have. And like I was mentioning, as an option, if you're not really happy about it, if you think it's not going to give you the benefits, and you might want something universal that you can probably use in your Sunset Canyon, you can definitely have Harald and Trajan. That will also work in Ark when you go into the middle, because you have AoE and buff and so on. As part of Sunset Canyon, obviously Constantine cannot miss in Sunset Canyon. Is a must-have march in Sunset Canyon, but I'm not sure how useful it is on the field now that I know that he only buffs up to 5 marches. And as far as I know, it might have a priority to buff your own marches rather than buffing the allies, which obviously would help you. It will be benefit for you. But again, it's only limited to 5 marches. I've done the video, and like I said, there is a card on the top about Constantine or any buffing marches in Rise of Kingdoms. So there you have the 5 marches. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about these 5 marches to having best of both worlds in Rise of Kingdoms. There can definitely be small changes and adjustments on players' preferences, but I think these are solid 5 marches that you can have on field battles and not be afraid of being swarmed and so on. Until next time, this is your boy Jeroni signing off. Peace out, yo, and take care. See you on the next one, and stay safe out there, my friends.